Okay, next up, I'm so excited about this. Next up, we have the amazing mind shark, Mr. Joe Cursillo. After graduating from Temple University College of Engineering in 1982 with a degree in civil engineering, Joe told me this valuable skill enabled him to plan strategically throughout many things to solve complex problems. But he didn't stop there. Joe continued his education by attending and graduating from the Temple University James E. Beasley School of Law, and for over 32 years, he practiced law first by serving as a prosecuting attorney with a focus on healthcare fraud and child abuse protection. Then he went into private practice. While practicing law, raising a great family, he established himself as an outstanding entertainer, magician, a mentalist, and humorist. I can only try to imagine what some of his trials and summations were like. I've asked Joe to share with our Business Happy Hours community. The title of his talk is The Meaningful Story: A Fox, a Girl, and Some Bears. Joe, our community is all yours.
Thanks, Frank. You know, I love this invitation, and I want to say what I'm about to do is cram an entire 1 hour of my law school syllabus on advocacy into 10 minutes. So this will be fun. I have always in my life been a storyteller. I tell stories everywhere I go, and people look at me because they know I tell stories. But what's interesting is, if you know me, you realize that there is right versus wrong, but that becomes irrelevant to me because I'm the person that picks the path to the best story. I want stories to happen to me. And people look at me and they don't believe my stories. They think I make things up. Well, I don't. And I want to share with you that for a period of years, my best friend was a giant. And my giant and I got together every day and we took walks and we talked. My giant had a name. It was Charlie Jones. And Charlie had a big property. And on this property, he had a library because all giants need libraries. And in his library, I found a book. And I opened the book, and in there was a story called Goldilocks and the Three Bears. It was the story of a young girl with golden hair who was wandering on the edge of the forest, wandered into a house that said, the three bears live here. And she saw soup on the stove, and the house was a mess. So she cleaned up the house. The bears came home. They were surprised, but they became her friend. And she ate soup with them. And then she left the house and went back to her grandmother's house. And the bears and the grandmother became friends. And the girl and her bears were friends for the rest of their lives. That's not the story you know, is it? See, that's not the story of Goldilocks that you know, because that's the version that was written in 1903. And it was written by Wallace Denslow. Wallace Denslow was the illustrator of The Wizard of Oz. Now we know why he was an illustrator and not a storyteller, because that version sucks. Nobody is going to know about it and nobody is going to care. But I read the book and Charlie looked at me and he said, Joe, never tell a story without a purpose. And then he hugged me, rubbed his beard on my face and yelled, never tell a story without a purpose. And I said, okay. And I realized at that moment that if I told a bad story, people just stared at it. It just laid there while they looked at it. But what I really wanted them to do was hang on every word that I said. So I wanted the story to have meaning. I wanted it to have purpose because I wanted them to follow along with me, share with me, and be with me. And when I was gone, I wanted them to feel happy about it. Well, I investigated the story of the three bears. Let me tell you something about the story of the three bears. The three bears always existed. In the beginning, they were bachelor bears who kept a sloppy place. I'm talking in the early 1800s. And all of a sudden, one day, into their home came a fox. The fox was named Scrapefoot. Scrapefoot ate their food, ruined their furniture, and ruined their beds. And they found Scrapefoot, and he jumped out of a window, ran away, and was never seen again. As the 1800s rolled on, the fox, and let me just say to the dead people like Joseph Kundell and Robert Sotheby, and the people I'm not giving credit to, I'll give you credit someday in a longer version. But along came the next story, the Vixen, the Fox. Maybe Sotheby was confused, but the Vixen became an old lady. And the old lady came in and ate the food and ruined furniture and slept in beds. And then all of a sudden, the version changed and it became a young girl named Golden Hair. And Golden Hair came in and she was found and she jumped out a window and ran off. Well, let me tell you some of the other endings here. In some of them, the old lady, the bears took her, captured her, and impaled her on a church steeple. In another version, she went off to jail. In some versions, Golden Hair died. But eventually, the story morphed into the three bears that we all know today. So why do you care about a battle between a fox and an old lady? The reason you care is because you want your story to be something that people understand. You want your story to be something people can follow. So let's start with the fact that we want the story to be not too hot, not too cold, but we want it to be just right. That is the rule of threes. And if you look at Goldilocks, there are three bears. The three bears, there's three bowls of porridge, three chairs, three beds. And the rule of three repeats through the story. And think about this. Would you feel differently at the story if it was the Papa Bear's food that Goldilocks ate? Would you feel maybe better if it was the Papa Bear's bed? No, see, we feel bad because it was the baby bear's bed. It was the child bear that she took advantage of. And that's what brings us in and says, we innately feel bad because the baby bear was taken advantage of. So this story sticks because it has what is necessarily needed to give us relevancy, a rhythmic story, and it is relatable. And that's really what we want. So the fox, the old lady, the little girl, they changed over time to become relevant. The rule of threes made it rhythmic. And we related to it because we felt bad for the bears and this burglar little girl that wandered into the home. So what we want to see is this rule of threes. Now let's talk about what I call the story rule of threes that you need to deal with. If you look up here, what you're going to see is the problem, the solution, and the resolution. So whether you're telling a story to convince your client, your patient, to get Invisaligns, or you're a contractor convincing your client that they should do an addition a certain way, or you might be an accountant convincing somebody that they should change their business model. It doesn't matter. When you talk to somebody, make the story have meaning. Start off. Tell them a problem. Explain the problem as you see it, but connect with them. Make them know that you understand what the problem is as you start to tell your story. So in Goldilocks, the problem was she was invading the house. We all felt the connection because we don't want our homes invaded. Now, when you get to the solution, this is the part where you explain to them all the good things that you can do for them, all the ways you can help them. And think about, you're not telling a story with characters. You're telling a story. that is looking for a solution. You're giving them hope. You're giving them the possibility of something better. And then the third thing is give them the resolution and build trust. The resolution is an example. For instance, I have to laugh because 8 months ago, yeah, these teeth were crooked. My dental hygienist explained to me that the problem with my teeth being crooked is they were going to be pushed out. She told me about Invisaligns being the solution, and she told me about how great they were. And then she proceeded to tell me a story of all her successful patients and show me pictures on her phone so I can see all the straight teeth. And now I'm one of those people on her phone because she built the trust to show me that it worked. So your story may not be a story with true characters, but it's going to follow the same rule of threes, the same pattern, the same rhythmic relevant system that Goldilocks followed as it developed. But you look at the person you're telling the story to and make it relevant. Even on his deathbed, Charlie was a giant. I sat with him in his final days as he would talk to people on the phone. And he, at this point, was becoming a frail little man. But he would pick up the phone and talk to people like the giant he always was. And even in his final days, I listened to him tell stories that gripped me and made me want to be a part of something. And I always walked away after I knew Charlie, and it's funny, he was my best friend for 15 years. It wasn't until about 10 years ago I realized he was my mentor. He taught me how to tell stories. He taught me how to relate to people. And, you know, I've given you the idea of being relevant and going through the whole concept of Goldilocks, having that purpose and meaning. But I want to make sure you have some resolution here. So let's talk about the rule of threes. See, it worked for the three little pigs. We know that. It worked for the three blind mice. We all know these stories. And it worked for the three musketeers. Count them, there's four. No one ever called D'Artagnan a musketeer because the four musketeers doesn't work. Three musketeers rings true. We believe in it. And by the way, for those of us that are baby boomers, there's, of course, the Three Stooges that we will never forget. The rule of threes has permeated everything that we do. The rule of threes, keeping everything in patterns, relevant and rhythmic, and making sure that what we have is something that is not too hot, not too cold, and just right. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that we establish with our clients and the people that we talk to that we understand their problem. We want our story to make it clear that we can feel their pain. We want the solution to give them hope. And we want the resolution to build trust. And when you tell the story, always tell it from the heart. Don't make up a story. I saw somebody post on Facebook yesterday, how do I keep myself relevant and not sound like someone else? I wanted to post, tell the story of your life, idiot, and stop telling other people's stories. Your life is full of stories. Your life is full of ways you can relate to other people. So relate to them. Tell the story from the soul, because let me tell you something, you want a decision from someone. The ultimate decision maker is trust. And no matter what anyone tells you, trust is the most emotional decision anyone can make. And if your story doesn't catch them, hold them and leave them feeling good, you're done. So that's what I want you to do, is go out and think about a story in your life and figure out how you're going to use that story to convince someone to take action and feel good about it. So I thank you all for your time today, and I'll turn it back over to Frank. Thanks, Frank.